I want to kick this video off by asking you if you can look at these two images, both taken on the same night, one with a 4-inch scope and the other with an 11-inch scope. Can you, with confidence, tell me which is which? How about now if we zoom in and take a look at these images at a larger scale? Probably a little bit easier to see the differences now. And I'm not really trying to trick you with this. You've probably picked which is which correctly, really no problem at all. I just want to show the differences between these two when presented pretty much in a vacuum, no other factors considered, just image A versus image B, and see which you prefer in that case. I do think it's fair to say that for most of us, the Edge HD image is probably going to be the better one. It has more fine details, more stars on display, and just seems like the better image when taken in a vacuum. But I also think it's fair to say that the smaller scope, the 4-inch refractor, really isn't that far behind. I mean, it's not quite as good, but it has other factors that I really like about it, such as the wider field of view on offer from any given sensor. That can be really useful, and it can open up a whole bunch more targets for you that the bigger scope, which quite frankly isn't suited for. Now, as we were just saying, taking these images in a vacuum is one thing, but, well, it's obvious to say that we don't live in a vacuum. There are a lot of other factors that we need to consider when it's coming to time to make a decision on a scope that you actually want to own and use long term. Now, there's no getting around it, really. Size does matter. It just does. I mean, if you want to take planetary images and have them be the best they can possibly be, then it's just an inescapable fact that a good big scope is always going to take better images than a good small scope. That's just the way it is. That doesn't really change things too much. I mean, for most of us, there are kind of upper limits on things that you're willing to set up and use and purchase and store. I think, though, planetary aside, deep sky is kind of where the lines begin to blur a little bit. With these longer exposures, you're more at the mercy of the atmospheric turbulence than you are with planetary and very short exposure lucky imaging techniques. And so some of these, large benefits that come from extremely long focal length, very large aperture imaging are kind of lost. Not entirely. A good big scope is still going to take a more detailed image than a good small scope, as we've kind of just demonstrated at the start of this video, but the detail difference isn't quite as stark as it would be in a planetary application. Now, as I've just said, size really does matter, but, well, that goes both ways. I mean, it can be a good thing, and it can absolutely, with certainty, be a bad thing, and I've been there. I've had scopes that are entirely too big, totally unsuited to what I wanted to do, which was setting up each and every night, carrying a rig out and carrying it back in at the end of the night when you're just really tired and want to go to bed, but you've still got to pack down an enormous scope and safely carry it away back inside. It's definitely possible to go too big, and I've made that mistake. For me, the reason I ended up with that huge scope is because I wanted to do a specific thing. I wanted high detail shots, and the kind of mental gymnastics that I pulled to sort of talk myself into thinking it was the right thing to do at the time. And I'm still glad that I did it, because it taught me really so much about using a big telescope and the things that I liked and didn't like about it too. But, I really was convinced that I was going to enjoy the results from it so much that all the downsides just would wash away and it wouldn't really matter. But just couldn't have been further from the truth. Now, if that sounds like you, and you find yourself often fawning over product pages for absolutely monolithic telescopes, then you might want to speak to your GP about getting vaccinated against aperture fever. It seems to be a real thing. The old saying is still really one of the best, and it's totally true. The best telescope is the one which you'll actually use. Now, with all of this, there are upsides, downsides to various different designs and sizes of telescopes. But I really think it's totally fair to point this out. There is certainly a point of diminishing returns, which is going to vary slightly for all of us. Where that point lays is determined by a few different factors, which we can try to talk about now. First off, it's going to be really talking about the big factor, and that is going to be size and manageability. Now, as we just touched upon, it really is easy to get swept up in aperture fever. If your interest is firmly planted in planetary, then yeah, to be honest, it's probably the best idea. If you can manage, afford and store a great big telescope, then more power to you. It's probably the right decision to make. But if your interests are more rooted in deep sky, then really you should worry a little bit less about purely thinking about the aperture of the telescope and pay more attention to how it's going to help or hinder you to take the shots that you want to take. Now, some of the realities of usability are going to come really after you've hit buy it now and it kind of gets delivered to your house. Storing, cooling, collimating, trying to manage factors such as the wind, that kind of thing, are all going to suddenly just come into sharp focus even when nothing else might on a given night. So for big scopes, a few things to ask yourself and consider before making a purchase would be: 1, where are you going to store it? Are you going to be setting up each and every night, or are you utilising a more permanent setup? What are your average night conditions like? If your average night is, well, average, then really the advantages of a large aperture are going to be diminished somewhat. When you actually get around to imaging, are you, in general, on a night pretty much totaled from whatever you've been doing during the day? You know, it could be your job, it could be whatever you get up to. Parenting, in my case, is leaving me, really tired every single night. I don't really have the energy on a night that I used to, because more of it's just been spent throughout the day. You're probably the same. And finally, the 5th point, this is really a big one. Are you okay with tinkering? Because it's an inescapable fact that pretty much all scopes past about 6-inch, there are some exceptions to this, of course, but pretty much all scopes past about that size are going to need collimating at some point, and that is a user completable job. It's not all doom and gloom. Obviously, some of these issues can absolutely be mitigated, as I've done with my own big telescope, but generally speaking, unless you're okay with most of these points that I've just mentioned, it might be worth looking elsewhere than the largest telescopes and maybe take things down just a notch. You can still do some incredible things. Now, the next big point that I want to talk about, and this is something that's changed just in the past few years really, is the processing tools that we have access to these days. These have been the great leveler, I think, at least when it comes to deep sky. Such leaps and bounds have been made. You'll probably see, if you've watched my channel a bit, I'm using tools such as BlurXTerminator to really bring the most out of whichever telescope that I use, be it a great big long focal length thing or right the way down to a short wide refractor. It's just an integral part of my workflow that helps me process images easier than ever before and get more details in all cases than ever before. Now, going back to what we talked about earlier, and as I've obviously shown at the start of this video, a good big scope is still going to benefit even more from those fantastic tools, as I've just mentioned. But the gap between a good big scope and a good smaller scope is certainly smaller than it's ever been before. Now, another big one, and it's been around for a while, is drizzling. If you are operating at a slightly shorter focal length, you may wish to utilize the drizzle technique during stacking, and it's really just boils down, generally speaking, to a box that you can check where it's going to take your data, provided you have enough sub-exposures and they're adequately dithered between each other, that is to say moved around, to sample the information coming from space, if you like, the positions of stars and details on lots of different pixels. It can kind of build up the missing bits, lost spatial information. It really is quite incredible. It comes with a loss of signal to noise ratio, so it does take a little hit there, but I think for certain targets, it can absolutely be worth it, especially if you're shooting something, small but relatively bright, such as planetary nebula, such as M57, as I can demonstrate for you in this video. Now, speaking of side-by-sides, I've spent some time putting together for you a bunch of different small demonstrations here. We're not going to dwell on them too long, but I think it's a useful way to touch upon some of the differences when you can actually see these scopes performing against one another side by side. So going back to M51 for this first demonstration, as I think it's a really great object to highlight some of the differences. It's got some very faint segments, it's got some very bright segments, and it's got some real fine detail going on too. Plus, we've all seen it basically at this point, so you kind of know what it looks like. No surprises there. Now, if we take the SK106 image on the left right here, take it with the 585, compare it with the Edge HD, the 2600 camera, and the 0.7 reducer. Again, the Edge HD on the right, and the Hyperstar, this time in a 585. When viewed like this, there really isn't that much between them. You can see that this one's a little bit dimmer, lower on signal to noise ratio, but not that much between them. Now, when we start to zoom in a little bit, I guess if we take this up to, let's say, a 3, so on, and really close in on things, you can start to see obviously some more of those detail differences that we talked about. Everything in the middle image is more finely resolved, right? It's apparent to see. Hopefully it's coming through YouTube compression for you, but in most cases, I'm just going to be honest with you, and I'm someone who loves detail, I actually prefer either the image on the left or the right. Probably in this case, the one on the right, because it's so rich in signal. And you know, as I was preparing this video for you guys, part of it obviously involved getting some data with the Hyperstar and things, and I'm probably just going to leave it on for a good while now. I'm enjoying it so much. Now, it's not all. This isn't an advert for Hyperstar, I promise you. But it's fair to say that once it's set up, it can perform really, really, really quite well. And as we're seeing that right here, a lot of the advantages just work well for me. If this was something I had to set up each and every night, it probably wouldn't be for me, and I really would be very strongly leaning towards the image on the left, because as I said, we're not operating in a vacuum. And of the different setups right here, this is by a country mile the easiest one to use, and it's not remotely close. I can't overstress it enough. It's just easier to balance, guide, cool. Everything's easier. You know, you can image more of nights of the year. Wind affects things less. And what are the trade-offs? Not bloody much. You know, there's a very slight loss in detail, a few less stars, that kind of thing. But I want to go on to showing you the effects of drizzle, basically. So the two images on the right are both taken with the SQA106. The one on the left is the Edge HD. So really a target that so strongly plays into the hands of the Edge HD. And drizzling has made that gap between the image on the left and the image on the far right so small. I would say the difference between the left and the middle is next to nothing. There's some small areas of more detail on the nebula, such as this area just at the top, like ear up here. The biggest difference is the amount of stars that's visible between these two, but that would be evened out a lot just by longer integration. This was just 60 minutes as a test. Obviously, we can see the power of drizzle in this case. The image on the right, when viewing such a small object at a large scale on your screen like this, it's just too pixelated, right? Drizzle solved all of that, but obviously lost a little signal to noise ratio, but not very much. Some stars have gone walkabout, but there's not too much to it. And as I said, just take more shots, and suddenly the gap is closer than ever. Again, it's a win for the Edge HD, but we're strongly leaning into its wheelhouse right here. And I think this is a great demonstration of the power of drizzle and when you might wish to apply it. I feel like this was a good example of just a clear win, really, for the Edge HD. So this is M88. This is 45 2-minute subs, so not very much data. Exact same night, exact same time, all that kind of stuff. And with all the kind of same processing applied, I haven't taken this all the way, but I tried to keep things as equal as they could be. Obviously, there's a clear detail win for the Edge HD. That's not to say the SQA image is bad, but just when viewed side by side, and again, we're doing it again in a vacuum. Yes, you can see that this is better, but all the other stuff that I just said is still true. The SQA106, it was so much, less stress to capture this data. I had a fairly gusty night, and let's be honest, the SQA didn't really care at all. I had a lot more subs I could have stacked on this. I could have stacked many more than the 45 that I've got, but I had to kind of nerf that data to match, for fairness, the Edge on the right over here, which managed 45 good sub-exposures after I'd filtered through things. And I think finally M82, this is probably a candidate for drizzling again, I reckon, as it's so signal rich, strong and bright. I kind of wish I had done a drizzle demonstration for this, but the M57 one just knocks it out of the park for a demonstration on that. But you can probably see once again, stronger signal, I think it's fair to say. On the SQA image on the left, it's brighter overall, even with the same kind of processing applied. There is a bit more detail in the edge image on the right. That's not to say, though, that this couldn't be manipulated with processing to actually come a lot closer to the edge, but I wanted to have the differences, you know, be realistic and apparent for you so that you could see them side by side. I for sure know that I could process this to get the gap much closer between these two, but this is just with equal processing applied, and you can see a small aperture can really take a detailed image still. That one on the left is still a very fine image of M82. It's just when viewed with the one on the right, you know, there is one clear winner once again. So I hope you've enjoyed this comparison, and really just to wrap up, I think it's fair to say that a big scope can absolutely still be worth the effort if you align with all the rest of the requirements that go along with owning and using a big scope. I also think it's fair to say, though, that the point I was trying to make overall, that most people probably don't need a big scope these days, given how far processing's advanced and all the other options that we have available to us, with these modern optics being so sharp at, you know, very compact, manageable sizes. Really the need for these huge telescopes, at least for deep sky. I know it's a different case for planetary. It's probably lesser than it's ever been before. I'm certainly someone who still owns and enjoys owning a very large telescope, and probably will continue to do so for some time. But it's kind of opened my eyes a little bit just how close the difference is between these different rigs, and it's given me a lot to think about, at least, and I hope it has give you something to think about too, and maybe, this is my great hope, maybe helped someone out there avoid making some of the same mistakes that I made going down the route of telescopes, which was simply just too damn big, and a big old headache to go with it. So hopefully it's had that effect. Anyway, just some food for thought. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider to leave a like on it for me, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you take the time to leave a comment, I will get back to you. It might take me a couple of days to get kind of fully caught up, but yeah, I will get back to you, and I'd love to hear what you've got to say. I really do. So thanks very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, whenever that is. So until then, look after yourselves, look after those around you, and clear skies.